Chairman, and thank you, the organizers, for granting me this privilege to be at Delhi Dialogue. Uh, First, I would like to concentrate on the cultural elements, the connections that exist between India and Southeast Asia, and aspects of people to people connections. And it is in this area that much of my presentation is focused on. I think both India and Southeast Asia are, of course, culturally diverse regions. And indeed, trying to find cultural unities is a important or a problematic in some senses in encapsulating Southeast Asian unities. That said, India and Southeast Asia connect in various ways, and I would like to mark out three strands that are central to cultural linkages and people to people connections. The first, already mentioned by attorney Vitriolo, is one that dates back into antiquity. That is the influence of India on Southeast Asia, on the development of grand empires in the region, uh, in southern Vietnam, in Cambodia, in Thailand, Burma, in Indonesia. Now, that strand was looked upon by early scholars as a type of colonial influence, and I think that was or has been proven to be misguided. Uh, Southeast Asian scholars have since reacted to that view, articulating that Indian influence uh, culturally was only a thin veneer, and I think that view is also misguided. And as is the case of many of these polarized issues, in effect, the truth lies in between. That it is true that there was Indian influence, but Southeast Asians, of course, added their own elements and other elements from elsewhere to make their own societies and cultures more sophisticated over time. At the same time, it would be dubious to look at this as a veneer. I want to share an anecdote of a moment or some time I spent in Bali, in a village in Bali. And there were children playing. They were 5-year-olds. And they were pretending to be superheroes. So you have in the US people wanting to be Spider-Man, or even in Singapore, children playing, wanting to be Spider-Man, wanting to be Superman. These children in Bali, they wanted to be Bhima, they wanted to be Arjuna, they wanted to be Hanuman. That is not a veneer. There's a certain depth of cultural connect that exists between various parts of India and Southeast Asia, granted that there are differences across the Southeast Asian regions. So that is one strand of connection. The second strand of connection is something that was emphasized quite closely yesterday, which is the deep connection that exists between the northeast of India and Myanmar, Western Myanmar especially, and especially for certain ethnic groups that straddle these national boundaries. The Chins and Nagas are especially the case. They exist across the boundaries. So as we look at developing communication linkages across this corridor, we think of connectivity. This should not, of course, be seen only in terms of trade. The potentials of trade are amazing, but more so than that, and as a person who is deeply interested in culture, it is the ability for these kinspeople to deepen already extant ties. And there will be spin offs out of this, something that I will discuss in a moment. The third aspect, and sometimes I feel not sufficiently looked at in terms of an India ASEAN forum, is a connection that exists through the diaspora. When we think of the Indian diaspora, it's often the case that we look at the US or UK. True, today the US is has the largest diaspora, but that's not the historical case. The largest Indian diaspora for long existed in Southeast Asia. And even today, there are upwards of or about 4 million members of the Indian diaspora based in Southeast Asia. Some of these are new migrants based in Singapore and Kuala Lumpur, but they are still a relatively small number. There's a very large persons of Indian origin diaspora based in this part of the world, particularly areas which were British colonies, Singapore, Malaysia, Myanmar. And this diaspora is not as connected to India as the new migrant population, but also seeks to reach out. And I have every expectation that a deepening connection between India and ASEAN will have positive ramifications also for this diaspora. Now, in the way of recommendations, as an academic, it's difficult for me to act as a policy maker, but I think many of the initiatives are already underway. The development of a Buddhist pilgrimage sites connection, an extension of that also in the educational sphere that emphasizes on this traditional connect, which is the Nalanda Srivijaya project. These are all positive outcomes, and they are developing and maybe need to be developed further. One of the elements that is also being was evident in my trip in Bali is how many Balinese people want to do Hindu pilgrimage sites to India. And this in spite of them recognizing that there are differences between Balinese Hindu religion and the type of Hinduism practiced here. But they're still keen on those connections. I think those connections should also be deepened the other way, which is a need for India and Indians to look upon the various sites, the historical cultural sites, as sites of pilgrimage. And there is much to say about pilgrimage tourism and the need to develop it. The second aspect of this is the need also to enhance cultural exchanges in terms of, for example, Ramayana, Mahabharata festivals. Each country in Southeast Asia, many countries in Southeast Asia have their own variations of the Ramayana and Mahabharata, where indigenous elements have been incorporated. Their dance forms have now, have contained their indigenous elements. And to bring these together and to emphasize on such cultural exchanges would be useful. With regards to Northeast India, of course, I've already mentioned how important this would be to build kinship ties, to forge and deepen kinship ties across these boundaries. But I think also one aspect is the spin-offs that come off of this. For many of those people who are living on the Myanmarese side, who are from these communities, now turn to Northeast India, for example, for higher education facilities, for medical purposes. And I think this will certainly be a spin-off of the deepening of communication connections. Now, what about the diaspora? I think I mentioned already the NRIs are already closely connected, but for the old diaspora, there is a desire also to reconnect. And some of these are quite distant. The people, the Indians who are based in Myanmar, have in many ways been insulated from India for a long period of time. And I think many of them are keen on certain programs that have been put out by the Ministry of External Affairs, like Trace Your Roots. There are also many Indians in both Malaysia and Burma who seek to turn to India for educational purposes. There has been a call for some time for the establishment possibly of a Persons of Indian Origin University. Maybe this is something that is really worthwhile and whose time has come alongside the already existent Nalanda Srivijaya project that focuses on the persons of Indian origin based in this part of the world. finally, and this is just an idea that I've been thinking for a bit of time. If you go to Southeast Asia, you get a lot of traditional medicines alongside, I would call it allopathic medicine, because I have great belief in traditional medicines. And a lot of that is connected to traditional Chinese medicine that exists alongside the traditional medicines indigenous to that region. Ayurveda has made a move in certain cosmopolitan cities. In Singapore, for example, you probably find 4 or 5 centers of Ayurveda in Singapore. And I think that there is great scope for expansion of this. I think people are turning increasingly to traditional medicines. Ayurveda has established a place here, and I think that there is an opportunity really to deepen its penetration within the market in Southeast Asia. That is not necessarily or directly a cultural impulse, but it can be seen as so as well. So this is in the way of the comments that I have to add in terms of cultural connections. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You